All right. Moving on to our next story of the day. This one comes out of one of my favorite uh, news journalistic agencies called the Grayzone. And this is an article or a story by Kit Clarenberg and Max Blumenthal. Max Blumenthal is, if not the creator, one of the co creators of the Grayzone. And they do phenomenal reporting, mostly on uncovering, shall we say, deep state um, documents, exposés. They're very anti war. They are what investigative journalists should strive to be, and unfortunately, they're increasingly more and more of a rarity in terms of the investigative journalist space. You have a few here and there, but it's not what it used to be. Uh, a lot of our media, especially mainstream media, but even a lot of the independent media are um, corporate line towers and basically just mouthpieces of varying degrees for the State Department and different moneyed interests. So the story that we are going to be looking at today, the gray zone causes, quote, biggest PR fiasco in history for U.S. government regime change arm, leaked emails review. And when I saw this headline, this is all the way back from July 30th. It's August 8th today, so this is about a little over a week old. This made me laugh so much. The Grayzone's publication of an embarrassing phone call with the National Endowment for Democracy vice president triggered an institution-wide meltdown at the U.S. government's regime change laboratory. Following the call, the group's founding president privately admitted the, quote, fiasco exposed major problems beneath the polished surface. Now, leaked emails obtained by the Grayzone reveal the organization has since descended into chaos, with 2 senior officials fired due to the fiasco, and remaining staff engaged in civil war between the neocon old guard and the, quote, woke new generation hired to replace them. That is so hilarious. Like, there's such. There's this infighting between the new and the old guard within one of our CIA cutouts, the National Endowment for Democracy, between like the new woke spooks and the old neocon spooks. That's hilarious. Senior NED management is currently in complete disarray, with 2 high-ranking staffers fired due to their handling of the Grayzone's phone call, and founding president Carl Gershman isolated and marginalized by those who took his place. Oh, this is amazing. What began as a bitter dispute over the decision to engage with the Grayzone ultimately devolved into a full-fledged culture war that pitted the group's neoconservative founders against its more liberal recent hires, derided by the neocon old guard as woke flakes, obsessed with microaggressions and compulsory DEI trainings. Oh my god. That's that's hilarious. It's even infested our regime change organizations that we use as cover for propping up and stoking opposition in countries where we don't exactly like their current leadership. Usually it has something to do with current leadership not just willy-nilly giving us their natural resources for free or pennies on the dollar. So we use the NED, and I encourage you to read all of the Grayzone's reporting on the NED over the years. They are, and specifically Max Blumenthal, whether it be interviews or articles on the Grayzone, are how I even learned about the NED and learned that, you put a friendly name on something and people really just don't look past the surface. But when you look into what this organization actually does, it really is just a bureaucratic agency, spun out of the CIA, that funds opposition in places that we would like to see regime change. Um, let's go on right here. Through its lavish funding of anti-government opposition groups in countries where Washington has sought regime change, that's what I was just saying, the U.S. government-funded NGO known as the National Endowment for Democracy, or the NED, earned a reputation over its 4 decades in existence as an overt operator doing the work the CIA used to do in the shadows. So yeah, basically it was spun out. It's technically non-governmental, but because they've kind of not shifted but lost because they're not overtly connected to the CIA, they lost a lot of that baggage. So when they go do things, even smart people's first instincts aren't to go, oh, weird, CIA is funding this over in this country, seems a little fishy. That degree of separation keeps a lot of people from looking any further, and they just go, oh, they're trying to spread democracy or whatever their, stated goal in that moment is. Critics have long pointed to the destabilizing effects of NED's meddling in places like Nicaragua, Venezuela, Ukraine, and Haiti, where the endowment has systematically undermined elected governments which undertook policies seen as violating the Washington Consensus. They reference documents demonstrating the group's origins in the Central Intelligence Agency of Ronald Reagan, and cited quotes by NED founders and Gershman himself boasting about their orchestration of coups and color revolutions. I wonder if the NED has any involvement in Venezuela currently with this most recent election. I would not doubt it in the slightest. The NED's longtime leader, neocon activist Carl Gershman, invariably shrugged at his detractors, while his colleagues insisted that everything his organization did was above board, conducted in broad daylight, with grantees generally listed on a publicly viewable website, and all in the name of the laudable mission of democracy promotion. How unbelievably ridiculous is that? They really are. Like, it's become a meme for anyone who's not insanely naive and even slightly anti-war and critical of our own State Department and foreign meddling. They really used we're just spreading democracy. We just happen to spread democracy to places where we want their natural resources, and that's basically the only places where we spread democracy. But that's just a coincidence, and it's just a coincidence that every time we try to spread democracy to places, there just seems to be a super US friendly puppet leader who, attempts to be installed in these countries. But that's another coincidence. They really use the democracy promotion language. That's unbelievable to me. They really are just saying the quiet part out loud. And they know most people are going to be like, oh, spreading democracy, that sounds pretty good to me. Since Gershman retired in 2021, the NED has undergone a dramatic internal shift. A new generation of ideologically milquetoast social progressives has taken the reins of the organization and attempted to align the NED's programming with the diversity politics that currently animate the Democratic Party. Oh my God. So here is where the Grayzone kind of not exposed, but embarrassed them. Among those hired in the post-Gershman era was Leslie Ahn, a self-described senior creative communicator who apparently knew very little about the NED when she came on board. In one of her first moves as the organization's vice president of communications and public engagement, Ahn decided to initiate a phone conversation with the Grayzone to refute the notion that her employer functioned as a CIA cutout. Oh, God. Oh, God. I can only imagine how that phone conversation went. I wonder if... Let's just watch a little bit of this. This is Max Blumenthal talking in the beginning. Dude's oh, well, I have these backwards. Dude is a badass. Definitely should be a model for future investigative journalists.
What you're about to listen to is audio of a phone conversation between me, Grayzone contributor Alex Rubinstein, and Leslie Aun, who happens to be the vice president in charge of communications for the National Endowment for Democracy. That's the regime change arm of U.S. government.
Yep.
Leslie initiated this phone call because she and her organization were upset, apparently, by Alex's characterization in a Grayzone article of the NED as a CIA cutout. So over the course of a 40-minute conversation, Alex and I provided Leslie with a fairly detailed history of the NED doing just that, doing what the CIA used to do covertly in overt fashion, sponsored by the US government.
Yep.
Hello?
Hey, Leslie.
Hi, who's this?
This is Alex Rubinstein and my editor, Max Blumenthal.
I know Alex was curious to know what you were interested in discussing.
Yes. Thank you so much. So we're just, there's been several columns where there seems to be the implication that National Endowment for Democracy is somehow linked to the CIA or part of the CIA, or I forget what the exact language was. It was like a cutout of the CIA. I'm not really even sure what that means. And I just wanted to reach out.
I'm not even really sure what that means, really. Is it that hard to figure out if you've even never heard that word? I get that she's probably going to try and split hairs of, no, we're not linked to the CIA. We have nothing to do with them. You can't trace any funding, blah, blah, blah. They've kept their degrees of separation for probably PR and for legal purposes, just in case. But obviously what Max Blumenthal and Alex Rubinstein and others like Kit Clarenberg over the years at the Grayzone have shown is that it's, I don't know if I want to say easy, but it's definitely possible to keep that separation while still completely acting as basically a cutout of the CIA. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, if it basically functions the exact same as what the CIA used to do, but under the guise of being an NGO, what are they doing, democracy propagation, then you might as well be the CIA. And I'm pretty sure they've even found like some direct links, but let's keep listening.
And ask you where you guys are getting that, because we're not part of the CIA.
We haven't said that you are a part of the CIA. The term cutout refers to specific remarks that have come from two of your founders, one being Alan Weinstein and the other being Carl Gershman, saying that it would be terrible for democratic groups around the world to be
super side point, but look at these two absolute ghouls. Like, these dudes could be ghouls in Fallout. It's just scum of the earth. I don't say that lightly.
Tina's subsidized by the CIA. We saw that in the 60s, and that's why it's been discontinued. We have not had the capability of doing this, and that's why the endowment was created. Similar quotes from Alan Weinstein, who said, a lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CIA.
Wow, he literally said that? I think I remember hearing that covered, and that is just absolutely insane. But kind of falls in line with the whole we're saying the quiet part out loud, vibe that the NED gives off.
Well, the National Endowment for Democracy was founded under the initiative of CIA Director William Casey. He wrote a letter to Reagan's Attorney General Ed Meese on a small working group to make recommendations to the president on the merits of creating a national endowment in support of free institutions throughout the world. And the NED came to being through a compromise between Bill Casey and Bill Proxmire, who was a senator from Wisconsin. I'm not sure if you know about this, but Proxmire had insisted that the NED be completely firewalled from the CIA. And ultimately, the CIA director, Casey, got Proxmire to compromise and reach an understanding that the Senate would essentially approve any U.S. intelligence involvement with the NED. And, at the time, the NED was sponsoring the American Institute for Free Labor Development, which was absolutely a CIA proxy operating under the auspices of the AFL-CIO. And they helped elect a right-wing military thug in Panama. His name was Barletta, Nicolas Barletta. He's one of many figures that the NED has helped to bring to power by sponsoring groups that were seeking to overthrow governments the same way that the CIA had done covertly.
I can give you many examples if you wish. I can almost guarantee she did not know any of this. She came in probably as comms person, just completely like, what do you mean? We spread democracy around the world. I'm part of this great organization. Aren't we great? And I bet this is all extremely new information, and I'm really curious to hear how she comes back from this.
I can give you many examples if you wish.
I mean, I'd love to have all that history and all that background. I mean, that's not how I understand our history to be, and maybe you know more than I do. But that isn't, NED is very much not a part of the CIA, not affiliated with the CIA. We don't go out and unseat presidential candidates or those sorts of things. I mean, that's not our role. That's not our purpose. So I'm aware of those old quotes. They're very convoluted and they weren't elegantly spoken.
Oh, they weren't elegantly spoken. Literally, the guy's saying, we do overtly, paraphrasing, but we do overtly what the CIA used to do in the shadows 25 years ago. Oh, just, they weren't eloquently spoken or elegantly spoken. That's it. Totally not just like giving the game away in a single sentence. I love how he gave all of these super specific examples to tying them to the CIA and, how a lot of these organizations are spun out of government entities to kind of give an air of respectability. What word am I looking for? Legitimacy, because obviously over the decades of regime change that the CIA has done, they've lost a lot of legitimacy, and understandably, anything involving them comes with a baked-in level of skepticism, which you, of course, should, but a lot of people for government entities are just so, they buy into everything hook, line, and sinker, but the CIA has a lot more likelihood to draw skepticism from people because it's just widely known now what they do across the world. And so one of the ways to get around this is to have NGOs that, like she's trying to claim, totally aren't affiliated with these other organizations that essentially operate and do the exact same things. And then you can point and say, we're not affiliated with them. They're doing something of their own accord with their goal of democracy propagation, and we're not doing anything. So it gives this cover for them, and I love how she just doubles down and reiterates after being given all of these specifics by Max about, how they're connected, and well, we're not affiliated with the CIA. She was so not prepared for this.
And they actually have sort of been around and sort of haunted us for a long time. And it's unfortunate. I think if you read between the lines, what they're saying is the CIA used to fund pro-democratic activities, and that we had a specific, that NED was going to be separate and different and independent.
Listen to that language. The CIA used to fund pro-democratic activities. The flowery sounding language that they come up with to describe regime change never fails to blow my mind. It's unbelievable to me.
Independent, and we are independent. But I'm really curious to know all the rest of this stuff, because I frankly didn't know it. Like, where would I find this information?
I'm surprised that you don't know it if you're working for an organization. I mean, you should know, and the NED is proud of the fact that it spent nearly $1 million or maybe more to unseat Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas in the 1990 election in Nicaragua and install a neoliberal Violeta Chamorro. The National Endowment for Democracy proceeded to sponsor, to the tune of over $1 million, NGOs and media organizations in Nicaragua that fueled a violent insurrection in 2018 that has left over 200 people dead, including many Sandinistas.
All right. I'm not going to go through this entire video, but I encourage you to go watch this entire video, give it a like, sub to the Grayzone, come read this article. Let's see. So I guess this call sparked chaos within the NED, as it should. You know, she's coming on to try and dispute that they are connected to the CIA, and is just absolutely getting her ass handed to her by Max and Alex. Now, leaked private emails exclusively obtained by the Grayzone reveals how On's call and its subsequent publication sent the NED spiraling into an existential crisis, triggering several firings, legal retaliations, and angry recriminations that continue to this day. One veteran NED staffer privately described the phone call as the, quote, biggest PR fiasco in NED's history. Oh my god, what a moron. She's just like, oh my god, this sounds like such a great organization to work for. I'm not even gonna look into it at all. What an idiot. The NED emails are filled with resentful tirades directed by the NED's boomer neocon old guard at their younger successors. In one exchange, Gershman described On as, quote, the moron. Trashed NED director of comms Christine Bednarz in another as a, quote, woke flake, and repeatedly questioned the competence of his successor, current NED president and CEO Damon Wilson. Referring to the NED's chairman Ken Wallach, Gershman grumbled, quote, screw Ken. Wow. From the perspective of Gershman and his clique, a collection of bumbling 40 and 50-something wokesters had infiltrated the endowment they built and was running it aground with their fixation on identity politics. Quote, the NED culture may be undergoing a sea change, Gershman complained at one point. This is hilarious. This is like something that could totally be in a sitcom where it's like, you know, the government's trying their hardest to enact regime change across the world, but you have the old boomers versus the wokesters internally, and nothing actually gets done, although they are getting stuff done. Don't get me wrong. Like, they're definitely, you know, propping up regime change, but it would just make a hilarious sitcom. Less than a year since On's disastrous phone call with the Grayzone, the former vice president has been fired and apparently furnished with a substantial settlement for, quote, sex discrimination. Her LinkedIn profile shows no trace of her employment history at the NED. Wow. Allen was terminated as well on the grounds of insubordination and as a direct result of his attempt to intervene in the Grayzone fiasco, he privately alleged. Wow. Since being forced from his job, he has plotted a scorched earth campaign of legal retaliation against NED leadership, but remains silent in public. Wow. While the U.S. Department of State and Congress continue to fill the NED's coffers with close to $200 million each year, enabling it to construct a flashy new headquarters just blocks from the White House, the leaked emails obtained by the Grayzone expose an organization adrift, with its founding fathers casting doubt on its future under the stewardship of a generation of corporate progressives fully aligned with the Democratic Party. See, that's the crappy part. This used to be, you know, the Democrats were never perfect, but it used to be much more of an anti-war, anti-regime change, and that used to be, I mean, even when I grew up, and I'm 27, almost 28, but even when I was growing up, it was changing, but there was still the vibe that the Republicans were the ones who wanted, you know, war and regime change, and you had the corporate Democrats who obviously were basically neocons with a D next to their name, but you had a lot more willingness to call out a lot of this regime change. And now it's just, I'm not going to say it's flipped because you still obviously have a lot of the neocons in office, but there's a lot more willingness on the Republican side nowadays to be anti-war. It's insane. The Democratic Party really has become the party of the CIA, and therefore their spin-offs and their cutouts as well. They do not call this out anymore, and most of them vote with every single war just along with the neocons. So it's crazy to see the political shift. If I were you and you're listening, go through this. It's hilarious to read the transcripts of these emails. It's hilarious to just see how they're flailing. But yeah, I wanted to cover that because it's hilarious, and I hope Max and everyone at the Grayzone who has been doing this investigative journalism over the years feels fantastic and got a massive laugh out of this, because it made me laugh to see these absolute ghouls flailing and, you know, in total damage control mode, considering, you know, the damage that they've done across the world. All right.